In Italy, the Earth is not settling down. First, new earthquakes shook the Campi Flegrei near Naples, then the ground suddenly opened up in Sicily, and more than 1,000 people had to be evacuated as a result of a dramatic landslide.
What exactly happened, and how dangerous is the situation? Let's take a close look at the current events, so make sure to stay tuned. A warm welcome, everyone.
Sicily, the island where the sun always shines. Well, here you can see me in Syracuse in the rain, and that was in summer. So sometimes it rains quite heavily in Sicily, and that was also the cause of the recent events. Write to me and tell me who among you has been to Sicily and where exactly. I'm always looking for new travel tips, and if you don't want to miss any updates on such exciting geological events in the future, then subscribe to the channel now. It's free. You'll never miss a video again, and you'll be helping me out a lot.
And those who have already subscribed would really help the video by giving it a thumbs up. 5,000 likes are the magic number for the YouTube algorithm. Grazie mille, ragazzi. Before we get to the landslide in Sicily, let's start with the current events at the flickering fields.
The supervolcano west of Naples continues to make headlines, and the latest data gives cause for concern. On January 14th, the Earth shook twice within a few seconds. The two earthquakes reached magnitudes of 2.5 and 2.2 and occurred northwest of the famous Sulfater. The quakes were relatively shallow at depths of around 2,500 and 2,000 meters. Local residents reported that they felt and heard the quakes clearly. Fortunately, there was no damage and no major unrest among the population, but these two quakes did not occur in isolation. They were part of a veritable swarm of earthquakes, and a new study on rising gases is also causing concern among volcanologists. I was there on site and took a close look at the situation.
Yes, on the night of January 15th, a total of 11 earthquakes occurred. That is indeed more activity than in the past weeks, but still far from the dramatic peaks we experienced in 2024 and early 2025. Despite this slight easing, there can be no all clear, because if we look at the past 21 years during which the ground has been rising, we see a clear pattern.
Earlier phases alternate repeatedly with more intense phases, and the phases of increased activity tend to become stronger. A new study recently published by an international team of researchers led by the Italian Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology is also particularly interesting. The scientists conclude that the current volume of magma in a reservoir at a depth of about 4 kilometers is not yet sufficient to trigger an eruption. However, they assume that in a few decades the volcano will be capable of producing a medium-strength eruption similar to the one that last occurred in 1538 and created Monte Nuovo, which is now located in the urban area of Pozzolia. Even without a worst-case scenario involving a very strong eruption that would have climatic effects across the entire continent, the study confirms that long-term measures are urgently needed.
What I find particularly fascinating is that the researchers in the study assume that there is actually magma present at a depth of 4 kilometers. Because scientists don't actually agree on this point at all, and it's a topic of intense debate.
Some assume a purely hydrothermal system, that is hot water and gases, but this study clearly supports the magma thesis. And that brings us to the latest geochemical data, recently published in the December monthly bulletin. Most values have remained stable, but one parameter stands out. The ratio of CO2 to water has continued to rise and is well above normal. Why is this important? The CO2 to H2O ratio provides us with crucial clues about processes deeper below the surface. Carbon dioxide degasses from magma at very high pressure and at great depth, while water vapor is only released much closer to the surface. A comparatively high CO2 content can therefore indicate a stronger magmatic influence, or in other words, magma rising from the depths or already accumulating. However, we must be careful not to jump to conclusions, as purely hydrothermal processes, such as the condensation of water vapor underground, could also increase the ratio without fresh magma rising.
But overall, the signs are increasing that the continuously rising carbon dioxide to water ratio over the past months is already indicating an accumulation of magma.
The ground continues to rise at a rate of about 2.5 centimeters per month. Since 2005, the ground has risen a total of 160 centimeters. That is really massive. So the situation definitely remains tense, even if there are currently no indications of an imminent eruption. But that brings us to the second dramatic event in Italy, the massive landslide in Sicily. On Sunday, January 25th at around 1 p.m., truly dramatic scenes unfolded on the outskirts of Niscemi in the province of Caltanissetta, along a slope on the outskirts of the town, the ground suddenly subsided by several meters. Initially, it was 5 to 6 meters, but the crack grew larger and larger, eventually reaching a depth of 15 to 25 meters in places. The whole thing extends over a length of several hundred meters, with some reports suggesting up to 4 kilometers. What is special about this landslide is that large parts of the slope slip down as a compact block, forming a terrace-like step. This is typical of so-called transnational rotating landslides, in which the slope does not suddenly lose its structure, but slides downhill as a relatively coherent mass. And the insidious thing is that such movements can take place very slowly, but still lead to massive subsidence within a short period of time. On the Italian channel Geopop, which I highly recommend, this was beautifully demonstrated using a creme caramel. This is roughly how one can imagine the geological process. More than 1,000 people had to be evacuated because there was an acute danger of further landslides along the edge of the collapse. Miraculously, there were no fatalities, but for the residents of Niscemi, it is still a great tragedy. You can see houses suddenly standing on the edge of a gigantic abyss, roads that simply break off, and residents staring in disbelief at the crack in their home. Geologically speaking, Niscemi is located in a zone characterized by sedimentary deposits.
The subsoil here consists of alternating layers of sands, sandstones, and clay-rich strata from the Miocene and Pliocene, meaning rocks that were deposited several million years ago. The combination of more permeable sand layers over less permeable clay layers is particularly problematic.
When saturated with water, these interfaces act as natural slip planes, and that is probably exactly what happened here. The region has been hit by extreme rainfall in recent days. The large amount of rainwater seeped into the ground and completely saturated the sediments near the surface with water. This caused the so-called pore water pressure to rise enormously, which drastically reduced the strength of the clay-rich layers in particular. These layers became a kind of lubricating film, and the rock masses above them began to slide. The whole process was exacerbated by the fact that the water-saturated rocks became much heavier due to the water they absorbed. At the moment I'm recording this video, the landslide is theoretically still active. The slope continues to move slowly but steadily. This is typical for this type of landslide. They can last for days, weeks, or even months. In some extreme cases, such landslides can even move over years or decades at a rate of only a few millimeters per year. The breakaway edge could grow even larger. Was this disaster actually predictable? The short answer is yes. Italy has excellent hazard maps that are publicly available and show exactly which areas are particularly at risk. And guess what? Niscemi is located in a zone with a very high risk of landslides. So the problem is not that the risk was unknown, but that preventive measures were lacking or not adequately implemented. And this brings us to a fundamental problem in Italy. There is a lack of a prevention mindset. Investments in systematic preventive measures are avoided. Of course, to be fair, it would have been extremely difficult to completely prevent a landslide of this magnitude. But the population could have been better prepared, early warning systems could have been installed, and endangered areas could have been left undeveloped in the first place.
Of course, I'll keep you updated on any geological events. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel now, and don't forget to give a thumbs up so we can hit 5,000 likes. And now, let's get to the mother of all volcanoes.
A huge area in Yellowstone National Park has begun to rise. Scientists have not seen this uplift for decades, and that raises the question, are we now possibly facing the eruption of the Yellowstone supervolcano? Find out what the latest measurements show and whether we need to be concerned in the video displayed at the top right. Be sure to check it out. As always, you'll find another video about science and space at the bottom right. Otherwise, I'd say see you in the next video. Take care, everyone.